Hey, gun people. I was going to do a little news video, but this article I think deserves special attention, and it's a real education in the failure of government, the failure of socialism, an education in what happens when you give government all power and authority to take care of you and make decisions and take away your ability to own guns and tell you how you have to live and tell you they're going to protect you, and then when things go down, how government just always takes care of government, sells out the people. This is a really good article here. So I I had to copy the article so I could kind of highlight some things, but if you want to read the article, I'm sure you can find it. There's only a couple pictures on here that are really out here that show much, but let's take a look at this article. So I wanted to point out some survival things and kind of how government works and how bad it gets when people don't get it. So Venezuela, of course, Hollywood was praising this place. All the idiots in Hollywood, the left wing was always saying what a great place it was because they had free medical and free college and everything was great, and the government took care of everybody, and they sold all their oil, and they had great natural resources, and they took in other people, refugees. I mean, they were just such a great place. The liberals loved it, Hollywood loved it, and praised it. And they won't even mention it now because they see the results of their ignorant left-wing policies. So, of course, Venezuela is obviously just out of control, upside down. Government doesn't care. Government abandoned the people. They took their guns. They can't defend themselves. And now it's just straight out. They're calling it Mad Max violence on the highways. I mean, it's just absolute. People are starving. The money is worth nothing, just like the U.S. dollar will be worth nothing if we don't get control of our government. I mean, this is just a total predictor of the future of socialism, or when government tells you, oh, no, we have all the answers. Just give us more power, give us more money, and we'll take care of you and you'll be fine. This is the end result, and it's such a great education, man. I wish if I was a teacher, this would be my #1 subject for educating kids on socialism, self-sufficiency, not depending on government, what happens when you give government power, and what happens when government says, you know what? We don't care. We're going to take care of ourselves. So let's go through this article on which is really well written when they interviewed these truckers. So this trucker here, he goes through the darkness with 20 tons of vegetables freshly harvested. So he has to take it on this route 560 miles. And while they're traveling, he says hunger's widespread, fighting surge and attacks on increasing lawless roads. Of course it's lawless roads. Where's government? The same thing government does now. People see this. I'm always so crazy. Look at any riot situation where the people fight back. Government doesn't go in. They stage, they block it out, they stay on the outside, and they let the people fend for themselves. And that's why I think the Second Amendment is so important. It's not only to defend yourself against a tyrannical government, but when the government sells you out, it allows you to protect yourself and your family. And when government takes those guns, then you're back to sticks and stones, and the government can only protect themselves with the guns they have, and they will not protect you. Such huge life lessons here, and it's so blatant, I just don't understand how people can't get it. And people don't want to explain it or say it because then they're beat down like, you don't know, and the government's good, and they'll help you, and you should pay more taxes, and you just, whatever. All right, so let's go through this article here if I'll try to stay on point. When hundreds of looters swarm stationary convoy overwhelmed drivers with sheer numbers. Of course, they steal all the rice, sugar, and goods that the truckers have to either load or buy or are responsible for. And the truckers are risking their lives out here so they can make an honest buck to feed their kids. Meanwhile, they're facing swarms of looters and uncontrolled highways. Why? Because government says, we don't care. We got guns. You aren't allowed to have guns. It's against the law for you to have guns. What happens? All the people working and trying to support their family, they follow the law and don't have guns. The criminals have guns, and they're taking from the law-abiding citizens who turned in their guns. So many lessons. Every time I say goodbye to my family, I entrust myself in God. So he pretty much knows he's taking his life in his own hands every time he goes out here. Looting of cargoes on roads and swords, Venezuela appears just a common crime linked to growing hunger. This is huge. When government says we're taking over the food, we're taking over the highways, we're taking over everything because we know better, and then when they abandon you, you're on your own. And when hungry people are dangerous. Desperation among the population of 30 million. Their money's worth nothing. They're hungry, and the government's abandoned them. And they can't have guns because they're good law-abiding citizens. And when the government said, we need the guns to protect you, to keep you safe, they gave them to them. Guess who has guns? The same people that always has guns, the government and criminals. Across Venezuela, 162 lootings in January, including 42 truck robberies. This is just what they're reporting. There is a lot more that doesn't get reported. Okay, the hunger and despair is far worse than people realize. Seeing on the roads, manifestation of that, okay? Seeing people stealing and butchering animals in fields. If you've got livestock to feed your family in your own fields, looters are coming and butchering your animals and taking the meat and running off with it. Well, that doesn't surprise me. If somebody's surprised about that, then they don't understand what happens when money and government in a country fails. They don't understand the fail of society. This happens in every fail of every society. It's happened in every society since the beginning of man. And yet, the only thing history teaches us is that people don't learn from it. So they attacked blocking the roads and protest for lack of food. It's become very serious. Of course it has. It always becomes serious. 8 people have died in lootings in January. The dystopian attacks, I had to look up dystopia because it's the opposite of utopia. So it's basically just chaos. On the countryside, the highest murder rates pushing up transport and food costs. Of course, when the government sends out, then it costs more to do normal business because now you have to pay people for protection. You have to pay for the gangs that are in charge. You have to pay for the crooked government who has sold you out. Guess who you're paying? You're paying the people with guns because you don't have guns. People with guns will always take from those without guns. So idiots that give up their guns will always set themselves up to be a victim. Huge lessons that continue to replay in history, and people don't learn from it. Truckers already face harassment, bribe-seeking soldiers. Guess what? The government wants their cut. Of course they do. Spiraling prices for parts, hour-long fuel hours, all the things that happen in every collapse of every society that collapses. And people don't get it. And they call preppers or people that prepare crazy white wing conspiracy. Those people just want their guns. They're just crazy. They think the government won't protect them. They think the government's going to go away. They think the government will turn their... Well, no shit. Anybody with a brain would think that. If you learn from history, government officials, representatives, security forces do not respond to requests. Shocking. LA riots, my number one good example. People destroying, looting, tearing up the country. What did the cops do? They set up perimeter and stayed outside and said if you're inside, you're on your own. If you're outside, you can't go in. We'll protect you from going in, but if you're inside, you're just screwed. Have a nice life. Thanks for giving us your guns when we made them outlawed and you can't own them. Guess who has guns? Criminals and government. Always. Barred by law from carrying a gun. Of course, trappers don't keep guns, so they just try to drive fast. Okay? One trip, a man appeared on his truck on a sidebar, put a pistol in his head. The car worker swerved hard to shake the assailant off. Probably the crook didn't have bullets, or he would have shot him in the head and took his truck. But, again, if he had a gun, he could have shot the guy off his truck. If he had a guy with a gun on top of his truck, guess what? The looters probably wouldn't have attacked it. Because looters usually attack what I call soft targets. Soft targets are idiots who don't have guns that think hugging and tolerance and acceptance and loving everyone will somehow keep you safe. Those are the ones that they attack. They don't attack the ones with the crazy conspiracy, conservative, freedom-loving gun owner sitting on top of the truck. Go back to LA riots. Look up the Koreans who defended their buildings. Their buildings didn't get looted. All the other ones got looted and burned. But, Rick, you shouldn't... Shut up, you freaking idiot. Let's see. Gangs are often charged safe passage or permission. So when gangs take over areas, they're setting up their own checkpoints because government's not keeping them in check. Guess what? Gangs have guns. But, Rick, if the government made guns illegal, how did the gangs get guns? Well, you're an idiot. So I'll try to convince idiots how to not be an idiot. You're just too stupid to talk to. Rotten wood can't be sculpted. The government gives no security. Shocking. It's madness. People have got used to a life of robbing. Well, no shit. All people will get used to robbing. I mean, it's just that it's when you're hungry and desperate, you don't care about danger because if you don't eat, you won't live. So what's the choice? I'll take a risk on killing someone else and maybe getting hurt, but at least I get to eat and live. Or I can just waste away and die. If we stop doing what we do to earn a living for our families, how do we eat? How do peasant farmers sell their produce? We have no choice but to keep going. That's always the way it is. When government abandons the people, when liberalism and socialism gets so big, government gets so big, they steal, they rob the resources, they flood your country with immigrants, they don't control your borders, they don't protect good, hardworking people. Instead, they protect good voters, good, ignorant people who would vote for them and give them power. This is the end result. The lessons here are just glaring. Sometimes gunmen on motorbikes surround a truck, slowing it down, pouncing like lions on stalking prey. In other incidents, attackers wait for a vehicle to slow down from potholes because government doesn't take care of the roads. But, Rick, we need to pay more taxes so they'll fix it. Yeah, you're an idiot. Before jumping on and cutting through the trampoline, hurling goods to the ground to their waiting companions. Shocker. They've learned how to loot moving vehicles. Wow. Who could have predicted that, Rick? That's just so crazy. Only liberals run around and say that. It's very easy to predict everything that's happening, and people don't see the path that this country is on. The looters use tree trunk and rocks. But, Rick, the liberals put up no tree trunks and no rocks are allowed, and the people are just ignoring the signs. We don't understand. Well, that's because you're an idiot. Pieces of metal and long spikes to bust the tires. Tires are going for like $300 a piece on the black market. You can't get them on the regular market. On the black market, you're paying $300 for a tire. Guess how the black market is getting the tires? They're going and stealing tires. I mean, it's just so freaking predictable, and people are like shocked. How can this be happening? I don't understand it, Rick. How can it be happening? Well, you're an idiot. Soldiers and police seldom help. That's a shocker. I would have never predicted that one. The trouble began when one or two trucks broke down and 60 people appeared from the shadows and surrounded us. Yeah, that's always going to turn out good when you find yourself surrounded and you can't own a gun because you're a law-abiding citizen and they got guns, tree trunks, nails with spikes on it. Yeah, that's going to turn out really great. An hour and a half behind his truck, let's see, by the time help arrived, when he called for help, the crowd had swelled to 300. From 60 to 300. If you've never been surrounded by 60 or 300 people, you have no idea how overwhelming it is. Your only thought is to get yourself out of there because you're screwed. A well-dressed businessman jumped on the vehicle and tried to reason with him. Yeah, that always works well with looters and crowds. They always stop and listen to reason. Yeah, that'll work. Suddenly, two military men were out. Yay, I thought, thank God, help has arrived. Really? Really? As soon as he said this sentence, I went, those two guys ain't going to do nothing. They're fools if they try to stop 300 people. Guess what? The crowd chanted, food for the people. The soldiers muttered, the things are insured. And they drove off. Perfect example of big government. When you give government the power to protect you, they get to choose when and if they want to protect you. That was the trigger when the soldiers drove off. They came at us like ants, stripped everything. I could cry with rage. Yeah, that'll help. Mad Max or Robin Hood, they're saying they're kind of stealing from the rich to give to the poor because they're hungry, trying to relate it to Robin Hood. You know what? That's what happens when you just put your trust in government. Big government's never the answer. I just don't get why people don't learn. The best protection is submissiveness. Really? Just hand over your things. Really? That's right out of the liberal handbook. That's right out of how to be a pacifist. That's right out of we need to get rid of these aggressive testosterone men because we just need more people wearing pink and hugging and loving and more transgenders and gays and less violent people, because then the best protection is to be submissive and hand over things. Unfreaking believable. When people are hungry, they are dangerous. Well, who could have predicted that? Through the history of time, who ever heard of hungry people being dangerous? Wow, shocker. All the truckers interviewed said they were murdered on the roads, mainly targeted by robbers, not spontaneous lootings. People aren't reporting. You don't go to the government and report things when they're not helping you. New tires are going for $70 million of their dollars, about $300 regular dollars on the black market. Wow. Looters often swipe them along for food. Let's see. The journey, they have 25 checkpoints, 25 places they have to stop and pay off guards. And for the National Guard soldiers to check their equipment, probably to get their stamp so they can get taxes. Anybody remember a thing called the Stamp Act? Back when this country was founded, people want to say, oh, it was about freedom and gun. The Stamp Act from the Brits trying to stamp everything in your house sparked a revolution and started this country. Let's see. Some bribe are required with potatoes because potatoes are now more effective than the worthless cash. That's a shocker. Who would ever think that printed paper given out by the government that don't have a gold or silver standard, that's worth nothing, who would think that potatoes, food for hungry people who are dangerous, would be worth more than cash? Man, I could have never predicted that one. Wow, they should teach this shit in history lesson. Let's see, on one occasion it was looted after a tire burst. Policemen join in the fray. Oh, what? Didn't we see that in New Orleans? Didn't we see the looters in New Orleans when the government cops came into food stores and were filling up baskets and stealing food too? Who could have predicted that government would join in with looters when things fall apart? Wow. Never could have predicted that. In the latest attack just days ago, we were traveling slowly over potholes on a convoy with 4 other trucks when they jumped out and started grabbing produce. Even though there were potholes in the roads, we sweat up and swerved to shake them off. It was either them or us. What happened to the liberal philosophy earlier about being submissive and just give them things is the easiest way? Well, if you do that every day, it kind of defeats the purpose of going to work every day and doing. So anyway, I thought this was a great article. I thought it's a great educational on socialism and liberalism and the ignorance of promoting, let everybody in your country, let them destroy your resources, let them devalue your dollar, let government pay for everything, let government offer free medical, free welfare, free homes, free everything to people that contribute nothing to the country. And then people wonder, how can we predict the failure of great Venezuela? How can this happen? Shocker. Mad Max violence stalks Venezuela's lawless roads. Wow. If only we could have predicted this or looked into the future. All right, we'll end that there with the little education and socialism.